Oh, geez.
There you go.
What'd you do? Wait a minute, don't go away.
Just click this button again.
Ah, okay. Click the old present button again. More seats up here, folks. And maybe other folks, if you want to make it clear if the seats next to you are free. So Laura, I'm going to let you say a little more about yourself when we get into the presentation. Is that all right? So in terms of just what we're planning to do today, we thought that obviously, well, we can't keep with the title we put in our original proposal. We had to write that before we knew the outcome of the election. So if you're wondering about new populations, which was in the title, that was meant if it was a different administration. That was not going to deport all the new populations that had been brought in during the Biden years. So what we're going to focus first of all on is the what you see there, the various enforcement policies that are sort of bringing a tighter and tighter circle around both on folks who have been in the country unauthorized for a while, a lot of folks who are newly being made unauthorized by various immigration policies, and a little bit about what's real and what's real now, what'll be real in the near term, and the like as well. And then we definitely wanted to cover issues with the Department of Ed, because that's obviously where a lot of you are getting some of your funding, at least some funding, and some of the issues with the dismantling there, what we know about that. And then again, related to those, what more to expect in the future. And then as you can see there, discussion, we're trying to leave a fair amount of time. And then it'll be 5 o'clock here. And so it's always 5 o'clock somewhere. It will be 5 o'clock here, and there's a bar upstairs after you hear all this. So with that, let me just say, for those of you who might not know us, we're a program within a larger think tank called the Migration Policy Institute. It's known for both its international comparative work on migration policies. We study a lot what's happening in other countries in terms of their integration policies. And then also in 2007 created this center within MPI in order to really look more closely and be making the case about how the US needed to have a more consciously balanced immigration policy that understood that thinking about integration supports that folks might need was a really critical aspect of having a successful immigration policy. So there's a bunch of the issues that we've been working on over the years. That's where we have, like, I guess you'd call, like, portfolios of work, but we also do a fair amount with other issues that come at us, make their way to us. So I'm going to dive right in with 2 slides that talk about some of the major policy changes. You'll be familiar with, I think, everything on this slide. The president, with the many executive orders that he signed on the first and second day after his inauguration, announced that there was an emergency being declared so that the border could be, in a sense, closed and people could be pushed back without normal procedures for hearing some of their claims and the like. Then also establishing a whole of government effort that kind of released staff from other agencies to be supporting CBP is the Border Patrol, ICE is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, lots of staff at the Department of Justice, including the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Agency, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, military, just a whole lot of formal mechanisms that were kind of opened up to make sure that those staff could be redeployed. You may have seen in the news that a lot of those people were standing around for the first month or so, or saying that they were standing around and that they didn't have much training. But as the whole machinery is picking up, they are being very much woven into it. The next thing you see there, expansion of expedited removal. I know that sounds that is like, you know, you're getting kind of deeper into immigration law talking about that, but the implications about expedited removal are that it used to be a provision of law that the president or federal authorities could use if there was sort of a real crush at the border. And if they found people who were clearly inadmissible there, that they were allowed to turn them back, or if they found them within 100 miles in 14 days, I think it was, of the border, the immigration officer could be both the prosecutor deciding that that you have committed a crime, you have an infraction, and also without sending you to an immigration judge, that same person could order you deported without going before a judge. And so that's been in place for a while, but not as widely used as it is now. And the thing is, now it can be used anywhere around the country. I mean, being within 100 miles of the border, if you think of how long the border is, really involved a lot of people, but now it can be used anywhere in the country. And it's not just if you've been here only 14 days. If you can't prove that you've been here more than 2 years, you're kind of picked up and swept out very quickly without the opportunity to go before a judge, unless you know enough. And we'll get into some of the, not in detail, but some of the Know Your Rights resources that are out there. But if a person claims a fear of persecution upon return or a fear of returning, then that is supposed to trigger that you go into a different process. So it's a pretty big deal in terms of how quickly deportations can happen. And again, I'm sure you've heard some of this in the news, that people are suddenly gone and or also sent to places like Louisiana, very far from where they might have an immigration attorney and the like. Next, this is a number of these things are in the courts, but so temporary protections, we used to show you a chart of all the populations that had temporary protected status. We have those in the links that we've loaded up into the Whova app. You can find a lot of different resources, and then we've linked to a bunch of organizations. So don't worry about being able to find things. But temporary protected status helped close to 1 million individuals, I think, in the high 800s. And then on top of that, you had the parole populations of more than 500,000 that were brought in during the Biden years under the Cuban, Haitian, CHNV, Nicaragua, Venezuela program, and then many more folks who were paroled without being under those programs. So rescinding that parole is one of the big things underway that's creating a whole new population of folks who were previously authorized, who are now unauthorized. And then I've heard a lot about the sensitive locations policy in the sessions I've been in so far. But so sensitive locations was the policy that existed for several decades in various forms that said that immigration enforcement agents were not supposed to or not allowed to even to enforce at healthcare clinics, at schools, at churches, and the like. So this was one of the very early executive orders getting rid of that policy and saying that agents could use their judgment with regard to that. And then also there's been a lot of coverage in the media about the attempts by the administration to take over military facilities and the like to create expanded detention space, and also to try and create more agreements with state and local governments. And as soon as the federal budget passes, to try and pay states and localities for keeping folks in their jails. So there's a plan, I guess I would say, for all of the different layers of what the administration seeks to have happen in terms of putting together what they call a mass deportation machinery. So some of the things that are still in process I was going to bold that one on top, requirements for registration of non-citizens. But I think you'll be hearing about this from your students and hearing about it in the media over the next days, because the administration, this is one thing that the president had also issued an executive order about on the first day of his administration, but a lot of people missed it because there were so many other things that were kind of more vivid and that people understood the immediacy of them. So registration is basically a catch-22 or a backdoor way of having unauthorized immigrants come forward and basically report themselves to the federal government. And so last month, a rule around this was published in the Federal Register. It can't go into effect for 30 days. The 30-day mark is April 11th. And it basically says that anyone who it's very specific, there are very specific things in it about like exactly who doesn't have to register and exactly who does. But basically anybody from a DACA recipient to someone who had temporary protected status, anybody that you imagine the government already had paperwork on you, does not have to register. Although they're in trouble and have legal infractions against them if they were not regularly updating any change of address that they had. So like these are like the other attempt is to pile up misdemeanors or other crimes if people have not been complying with all the fine print of what their terms of either release or their terms of entry were. So the folks who are expected to register are folks that the government doesn't have paperwork on. And so it really is the unauthorized population. And it's really something that people need to talk to attorneys about if they're fearful of coming forward to register. But I think the other thing that's sort of out there in the legal world is this is being taken to the courts. And so it probably really doesn't, if a person is very fearful and expects that they might even be put into expedited removal on the spot, that there may be a stay placed on this by April 11th. But so I just have heard people talking about, oh, sorry, I never thanked all of you who answered the poll questions we had. And a number of you were saying fear, 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 on the part of your students, and lack of certainty and fear of being separated from their family members, et cetera, et cetera. So this is one of the things that's like right in front of everyone right now in terms of the fear and the uncertainty. For those of you who have been working with refugee populations, you know that there's been a crisis there where a lot of the funding that was supporting that was coming from ORR almost, I think it was sort of an additional $800 million that had come down in the prior fiscal year. So when the continuing resolution for the existing budget went through, those funds were sort of additional funds that had come during the last year of the Biden administration. They're not funds that were continued under the continuing resolution. So there was both the bottom dropping out under a lot of the additional resources that had gone through to support a lot of the refugee populations. And that's dating back to folks from Afghanistan, from Ukraine, folks under the CHNV program. All of those parolee programs are the ones that additional money was being sent in most cases to help support folks. So the refugee resettlement field is facing numerous crises. And one of the things that I think folks thought, well, it's only a temporary halt theoretically to refugee admissions. The fact is many thousands of people are stranded all over the world who were part of the process coming in. They're not able to stay in many cases where they were. There's not the funds going to international agencies to support them where they were. So the sort of all the pipeline processes are broken down and are very hard to bring back up. But then one of the, in terms of ringing the fences, thinking of a lot of the other actions that they could take, the administration basically rescinded its contacts its contracts with the 9 major national refugee resettlement agencies. So without those contracts, you really don't have the legal structure to be bringing refugees in, even if you brought the pipeline back up, and they play a role in the selection and bringing folks in and all. So I think you'll see, if you're not seeing it already, a real collapse in the refugee area. And then there's a lot of controversy in states around measures that are either trying to promote more cooperation with immigration enforcement efforts, others that are forbidding it. But because so many local sheriffs are elected, you have even in places like California, where you have a lot of strong rules against state cooperation, you still can have local sheriffs signing these agreements to work with the immigration enforcement services. So just another really important issue to keep your eye on. And then this is a big one for those of you who know about ITIN numbers, where, even in some adult ed programs that were working on entrepreneurship and the like, they were helping immigrants who didn't have legal status to actually pay their taxes and be known to the IRS. And that database is what there were a number of databases that were identified before the administration came in. And they have been working very, very hard to get access to them. And so it does appear imminent that the IRS, under its new commissioner, is making a deal with the administration for how to get access to that information. And there's been an ombudsman who was trying to uphold the prior rules around the database for all the places where the families that unaccompanied minors were resettled with. Very often they were family members, extended family members. That database is also very much under threat of being turned over as new folks take their positions within the various parts of the government. All right, Art, would you like me to stop? There's only 2 more. You can see them. So in the same way that there's threats to big law that I'm sure you know about, where the very big law firms that had represented folks that President Trump felt very offended that people had represented folks who he deemed his adversaries. Similarly, when it comes to legal services providers for immigrants, actually anybody who's here, isn't it here in Texas that some of the border groups are some of the Catholic groups that were providing shelter and the like are accused of harboring or of transporting and are under threats of arrest and closure. And then finally, and this is the transition to Laura, who does an awful lot, among other things, following what's happening with U.S. citizenship and immigration services and citizenship processes generally. There were, for many years, grants out there to support the citizenship process and help folks make their way through it. And there was an elimination, then just a freeze, and the expectation is that it'll just be more paperwork, but that the administration will eliminate those as well. So anyway, there's more, but I'm only telling you all this to say it's sophisticated. It's very sophisticated, and really trying to get at a lot of the different points of the system, knowing that some of the efforts might be blocked, but that others might succeed, and that they might as well take every swing that they can. So there's a lot to say about sort of protecting, trying to protect programs and trying to support individuals who are facing a lot of these threats. But we'll get to that in a second. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Laura and advance to your side on this.
Thank you, Margie. I hope folks in the room can hear me okay. And also folks who are joining us on Zoom. thanks so much to COABE for making it possible that we can join by Zoom and for an incredible conference. Thanks to my colleagues at MPI, Margie and Jake. Jake's doing heroic work answering questions and putting links into the app. So thank you for all of that. My name is Laura Vasquez. I'm the director for immigrant integration at Unidos US, where we conduct policy and advocacy work here in our Washington, D.C. headquarters, but we also work with a network of 304 community-based organizations across the country. Many of them run programs for adult learners, but they also are made up of charter schools, of federally qualified health centers, early childhood centers. So what I wanted to share and bring to this workshop was the idea that probably what a lot of you are hearing and what a lot of you are seeing in your programs is also something that's being seen and felt across a variety of different programs. So this is not news to you who are in the room or who are seeing this slide, but just to give you an overview of what we're hearing from Unidos US affiliates and partners because of the enforcement actions that this administration has taken. And the things that you see on the slides are the impacts that are being felt in communities that I'm sure you're seeing as well. And that's because policies have consequences far beyond paper. So we know that there's reports of families who are fearful of encountering immigration enforcement. And so there's reduced attendance at a whole host of different types of programs by a whole host of different organizations providing different services. So that results in that reduced attendance has resulted in some organizations, but not all, deciding to take programs back into virtual modes and providing a lot of services online. It's also resulted in shifts to needing to provide know your rights information, family preparedness workshops, and clinics around signing powers of attorney forms, and also organizations needing to learn, understand, and establish protocols to protect their own organizations because of the rescission of the sensitive locations or the protected areas memo. If you can go to the next slide, Margie, please. What I wanted to spend time on in this presentation is sharing with you this resource guide that I hope you can access either from this bit.ly link or with the QR code. And we've included it in the resources on the app. But I think that one of the most important things that adult education programs can do right now is to ensure that community members know their rights and can assert their rights and have information to make plans should they be impacted by immigration enforcement. I know this has been a topic at the conference, and I know many of you have done this already, but I just can't emphasize it enough that this is really important. We're only about 70 days into this administration, and as you'll hear from Margie, and I'll mention it as well, that this administration is seeking an incredible infusion of additional resources to increase what they've already done in these 70 or so days that they've already been in office. So, continuing to make sure that people know their rights and can exercise their rights is going to make a big difference as we see immigration enforcement resources and implementation increase. And so I just, a fun fact that I would share is that our colleagues at the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, they started in about 2007 producing a red wallet-sized Know Your Rights card. And since 2007, about 16 million of those cards have been printed and distributed. But 9 million of that 16 million have been distributed since the 2024 election outcome. So that's 9 million Know Your Rights cards that have been distributed in just the last few months. And that's really important for people to know that they are empowered with information to be able to know what to do if they do encounter immigration enforcement. There's a fantastic New York Times piece that was written by Miriam Jordan where she profiles individuals who did encounter immigration enforcement agents. They asserted their rights and they remain in their communities today. That's why this is so important. So I'll just spend a little time describing what is in the resource guide, which we at Unidos US intend to be a living document. So when you access this resource in the future, it may have new resources on it, and we may take down some resources. The idea is that we are vetting materials to make sure that it's reputable, it's from reputable sources, it's up to date, and that it's curated. So we're not putting all of the Know Your Rights resources on there. There's many really great ones, but a lot of them are the same. And we just wanted to make sure that folks have the chance to review one version of it. It's really good, it's solid, we're getting it out there. So the guide includes the Know Your Rights information with the links to the resources in many different languages. But we also know that, as Margie referenced, a lot of people are going to need to seek advice from an attorney or an immigration legal service provider. So we include 2 national directories that are important for people to know so you can refer your students or their families to them. There's a national directory at immigrationlawhelp.org that's the community-based immigration legal service providers. And then the American Immigration Lawyers Association is the bar association that compiles a directory of a national list of immigration lawyers. And those are both directories that are available in the resource guide. There's directories that are searchable by zip code. So if you have a student who needs that information, you can just pull those up and give that referral. We also are including in the resource guide the things that we know many organizations are needing right now, which is how to give guidance to families about protecting their assets. Many of them have been in this country for a long time. They're homeowners, they've run businesses, they have bank accounts and things that they need to consider how they would settle those if they were not going to stay in the United States. So what we've heard from some of our affiliates as they're doing these family preparation workshops and giving people information about what to do with their assets is that it's very difficult and challenging work, but families walk out relieved knowing that they have done it. And so they're included in the resource guide. For example, the Appleseed Network has a phenomenal guide that walks through checklists of different types of assets that people can walk through. There's also information about how to develop your own organization's protocols if you need to, if you don't have them in place already, and if your organization is concerned that immigration enforcement agents could come to your organization. What should those protocols be? What should staff be trained to do? What should folks know? So I wanted to make sure people have that information. And then with that, if you have questions about the resource guide, we can discuss it during the Q&A, but I'll pass it back over to you, Margie.
Great, thanks, Sarah. So switching over to issues with the Department of Education, I don't think we have much to add to what you may have already heard from other folks, so I'll just go quickly here. But it does, well, as you know, the president had ordered the dismantling of the Department of Education to the maximum extent appropriate and permitted by law. And so we're waiting to hear if the Congress will speak up, and if so, how. But it sounds like the kind of broad outlines of the plan are to move student loans over to Small Business Administration, to move adult ed over to Department of Labor, to move the disability special ed funds over to HHS, which, by the way, is having 10,000 people laid off today, allegedly or reportedly. And so it's, I don't know, it's not gossip, but like, it's not real either, like exactly what they might do. So it's hard to follow the trend line on that with Secretary McMahon only really taking office a week or two ago, and with the Health and Human Services folks and Robert F. Kennedy coming in, a lot of the focus was more on the medical side of things, not the health insurance, even just the medical research, vaccine research, what kind of information was being put out about vaccines. A lot of the grants for trials, those sorts of things were in the early stages, but we really don't know about all of the services that were under the family, the ACF portion, the Administration for Children and Families, and what'll be left if you try to put special ed over there. But so, you know, there's certainly mayhem to come where that's concerned, but I think it's just very, very broad outlined still. And then at the Department of Ed, I was scanning the room to see if Jeff Fantine from National Coalition for Literacy or Jeff Hutchison. I think my eyes are good enough with this assist from my glasses and I don't see them here. But what I heard yesterday from Jeff, who's following all this closely, we had known, you know, I don't know how many of you knew that sort of the list of a lot of the people who had been let go with the Department of Ed was available from the unions, and you could see that there was just a huge list, a huge portion of one page was all the Octave staff, and then all of the Office of Civil Rights staff being laid off, and then what's left is going to be moved over to the Department of Justice. But in any event, it sounds like Octave went from 26 to 8 staff, and then we heard yesterday from Jeff it might be to 6 staff, and that it's only the accountability staff that are left. But how the accountability staff would ever even get money out to the states, you know, it just is, it's hard to fathom how any of this could possibly work. And I know that some folks were raising concerns that they needed, that your fiscal year very often starts on July 1. And so there are always special provisions that you could get some of your money in time to start your year before the federal fiscal year started and the like. And it just, you know, sounds like that is too deep in the weeds for, you know, the way things are, for the way things are moving so quickly. So I think you can feel it all throughout the conference, everyone trying to figure out how to bring a lot of these issues to the to folks in the Congress who might care about them, and also to other federal contacts, and also to figure out a media strategy around that as a way to try and get attention for that. Sorry, and I know a lot of you are probably involved in the technical assistance contracts and the like, so obviously those were really enormous cuts as well. So yeah, these are just pretty obvious things that we, from our point of view, we had thought it was, the things seem to have been moving forward in the prior administration to figure out how to sort of live up to what the department had, things that had been mentioned in legislation about supporting immigrant integration and the like. And there had been attempts to try and create frameworks for that. The EARN program, which some of you may have been involved in, all those sorts of things were positive signs that were underway there. But we're pretty sure that that has fully been smothered by the scale of the other issues that other problems that the department will be facing. And then a particular concern to us, some of you know that for many years we've been arguing that it's almost a head fake, I don't know, I can't think of the right word, to like be leaving family literacy in the law when actually, if you're trying to work with a custodial parent of a young child who can't meet any, who can't meet 4 of the 6 outcomes under WIOA, like who's really able to like abide or sort of fulfill that part of the law. And so we had been looking to have there be no have programs not be subject to those work-focused outcomes if they were working with custodial parents or elderly folks over 65. But so if things are moved over to DOJ, to Department of Labor, we think a lot of the things that we might have had a little hope about having a conversation around are also sort of swept away by the scale of what's happening. So Laura, give us a little well, we're finishing up here, but with just another few slides about other important changes ahead to keep your eye on, as if we didn't worry you enough with everything we've just said. So Laura, you want to do the look ahead?
Sure. Yeah, so just a couple other things, right in Washington this week and in the next few weeks, Congress is working towards moving a fast track process. I'm sure that this has been discussed at the conference as well, but the budget reconciliation bill would take a lot of resources away from things like adult education, other education programs, from healthcare, other important priorities, and boost funding for immigration enforcement and this whole of government mass deportation approach. So, if the government, if Congress does not put a check on that and do some oversight, it would result in more cuts to programs that support adult learners and put more resources towards immigration enforcement. We also would anticipate that, in future appropriations cycles, there would be cuts if people aren't speaking up and defending some of these programs. There are a number of things that have been stated in the executive orders but haven't yet been spelled out in policy changes. So, there's just a lot that we're looking to see how the implementation of some of the executive orders would actually take effect. And then also, as Margie referenced, a lot of the things that the administration is seeking to do are being challenged in the courts. And so there's a lot of ways in which students and programs are in limbo because of challenges in the courts where litigation is going to be what ends up ultimately deciding how these things will play out. So one of the things that's important to know that I'll flag, I know people have talked about the U.S. Citizenship and Integration Grant Program that, at its height had been $25 million appropriated from Congress to be able to help people who are eligible to apply for U.S. citizenship to be able to make it through that process with getting supports for the civics in English and getting assistance in filling out the applications. So those existing contracts are cut, but I think it's really important to note that one, there's litigation that's challenging the cancellation of those contracts because of that being funding that was appropriated by Congress for that explicit activity. And then there's also efforts to make sure members of Congress are standing up for that program. So Congressman Jimmy Gomez in California in the Los Angeles area has led a Dear Colleague letter around that grant program. But just, because I know many of you in the room probably do work around citizenship application assistance and helping eligible students who are permanent residents to apply for U.S. citizenship. You may remember that in the first Trump administration, the administration then sought to make the process harder. There were attempted changes to the N-400 application, attempted changes to the civics test, and then also attempted changes in the fees. So in the first Trump administration, they sought to eliminate a fee waiver and a reduced fee and sought to make it about $1,000 to apply for US citizenship with no chance for a fee waiver. And that was all blocked by litigation in that first Trump administration, but there's no indication that they wouldn't try that again this time. So it's something that we're keeping an eye out. And then also, as I'm sure many of you know, the executive order that eliminates the Institute of Museum and Library Services. That's another source of funding where a lot of libraries and museums are great partners in promoting naturalization and helping people get the information they need. And that's also one that's in the headlines today, where a lot of that staff have been laid off today. Next slide. I'll pass it back over to you.
One more of the
Mhm.
other important actions. So I'll do that.
Mhm.
Okay. So please put in your questions. We're just about done. So the last two things that are sort of important things that are just spooling out: the executive order designating English as the official language of the United States. Jake has written a short read on that. I think we loaded it up in the Whova app, and basically that's. I don't want to minimize it, but if you know the language access deal, translation and interpretation, it's all based on the Civil Rights Act from the 1960s. It was implemented as part of federal policies over the decades. And one of the things that President Clinton did back in the late 1990s was he issued an executive order that said, hey, this civil rights obligation to make sure that that being a limited English proficient person doesn't prevent you from accessing government information or government service. That's not just for everybody at the state and local level that receives those funds. Federal agencies have to do this also. And so that executive order made federal agencies have to make a plan for how, like, if you're Social Security and you had a website, or if you had a call line, you had to have services available for folks who were limited English proficient. So that's what the heart of this executive order is, because it sounds like whoever wrote it understood the law and actually sort of wrote it in a kind of measured way. And so we're not, it's not like we're sanguine about it, because agencies, then federal agencies, get to kind of decide based on whatever their agency lead thinks that is really appropriate for their agency to be doing. And DOJ is going to issue new guidance. And so we expect that there's going to be a softening, but it's, and it should mainly be about the loss of this requirement for the federal agency itself to be providing language access. But who knows, like, whoops, there could be like a tidal wave that sweeps that along into other things also. One of the things we're trying to emphasize is that the opening portion, preamble of that executive order says that it's important to support learning and adoption of the English language. So when you're out there talking to your legislators, who other than the president and his executive order saying that it's important to be supporting English language learning. So anyway, so that'll take a while to unfold. We need the DOJ guidance, et cetera, but don't call it an English only executive order. Jake will get after you. Like, I think because even some people in our organization, maybe even me, were calling it that. So just English as the official language, which it doesn't really do, so it's a big play, but, big play in the public relations part of it. But really the heart of what it actually does is something that's kind of, important, but it's kind of like an insider federal policy thing that happened. And then one thing that really could affect also the adult ed field is this ending taxpayer, I didn't know subsidization was a word, but apparently it is, of open borders. And that's a call, it's kind of looking at or acting as though unauthorized immigrants could be accessing big federal benefits programs, which they're already ineligible for. But it's saying that agencies should identify all federally funded programs that provide cash or non-cash public benefits. And so those could be redefined to be including adult ed. And so it could be the way that immigration status restrictions become imposed on adult ed. So keep your eye on that. And so then we wanted to leave you with a few big picture potential actions that groups and individuals can take. So you'll see here, what's unique about this presentation for us compared to other years is we usually could say, this is what happened. This is who it affects. This is where you get, like that it was a more static thing, but so many of these things are unfolding. And so we suggest, first of all, on the adult ed side, that that COABE, TESOL, and Jeff, I think Jeff isn't like publishing as much from National Coalition for Literacy, but he's working the Hill quite a bit around these issues. So I think staying connected however you can to what folks are saying in terms of how things are unfolding in the adult ed field, I think would be important. And on the immigration side, our shop is, I think, widely acknowledged to be sort of the, one of the, if not the primary place of record for what's happening. We have a policy beat that goes out every 2 weeks. We're publishing way too much all the time. So, sign up, but don't sign up for everything because it'll drive you crazy. But you're welcome to. Same thing with Unidos US, and because there's a lot more than what Laura gave. I mean, that the resource that she provided has so much stuff packed into it, but they're very much on top of all these issues. Some of you might be familiar with Clinic, Catholic Legal Immigration Network. They're super active in a number of states. And similar to what Laura was describing, they're working with families all the time in terms of setting up guardianship for US citizen kids, or helping folks just understand, the information they should have on them all the time, et cetera, et cetera. And National Immigration Law Center and Immigrant Legal Resource Center are totally places that you can get very, very good, clear resources. Those red cards that Laura was speaking about are available, I think, in 19 different languages at this point. I think, the other thing I wanted to say is, I just came back from doing a presentation, or recently did presentation for school district superintendents. And I just want to say that, we know that a lot of people are trying to thread the needle and do not want to sound like they're helping folks evade enforcement, or that they're trying to thwart enforcement that would be legitimate against folks who have a set of crimes, have a judicial warrant that is saying that a judge has agreed that this person should be deported and the like. And so I think if you're trying to figure out when you might be crossing the line, things like that, that's something that we're very conscious of at our organization. So if you're struggling with any of that, we're very happy to talk to you and point out where the edges are and how to think about those things if you're trying to make policies around that. There could be, I don't know if I'd call them opportunities, but you might need to be remaking your systems at the state level. And so anything you've ever been opinionated about how it should work and the like, we all might be in a situation where states are doing study commissions about what should they do. And, maybe there are going to be very few federal dollars, maybe all this, some states massively overmatch. If any of you were at the state adult ed director's late afternoon session yesterday, I think California said it was a 500% match that they're doing, and a few others were in the 200 and 300 range. So in a lot of states, you have more money in the system from your state, and that this is a moment when states might really want to rethink how they're using their dollars. What do they think accountability should be for them? What might you do in terms of local literacy zones that are tapping into other state funds that are funding things in a community that maybe for a long time people have wanted to connect, that sort of stuff. So thinking that we really might be in a how to rebuild it situation is, I think, you know, it is important to start thinking about that and about what you think that should look like. Laura and I are both very worried about the federal and state budget debates that the federal government was shut down back in 2019 over a request for $5 billion to build the wall by President Trump. And I think the figure that is being talked about now is over I said 5 billion, right? Now, yeah. And I think the figure now is 800 something billion that they're trying to put in the budget for enforcement. So it's like almost unimaginable, like how you could even spend that amount of money. But this is this is all in play now, and it's serious. That those, that the budget debates, what'll be cut, what'll have to be cut from Medicaid to afford the tax cuts, et cetera, more than any other time in my lifetime. I think this budget debate is just going to seal the fate of so many domestic programs. And, you really can't rebuild like that a lot of the things that might disappear. So really thinking hard about how what you think should be happening with that and how to act around it. It's now or never. And then, oh yeah, sorry, that runs off the bottom of the state, but the starter engage in local planning regarding scenarios for more effective use of all the different adult education funds is sort of what I was saying earlier. So with that, we open it up to you all. And we were thinking that we might take questions like in sets of two, just sort of Jacob walk around with the, and we also were thinking if you have a question that's like very related to what someone else asks, just like really say, wait, I just want to add a little addendum to that question so that we can try and group things together as makes sense. So just raise your hands. We'll bring the microphone around. See you at the bar, anybody who's leaving.
Hey, Margie, there's a question in the chat. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
I don't know the answer to it. But the potential fate of the Office of Migrant Education within the Department of Ed. Do you know anything about that? I don't. I know my colleagues here at Unidos might know. They're planning to go to a conference on migrant education in San Francisco in a few months or weeks. But I don't know if anybody in the room knows.
Yeah, I don't know. But then I think migrant ed might have to stay in the department along with Title I and Title II. Yeah, so we'll figure that out and try and put something, get back on that as soon as we know.
I was wondering, do you have numbers of people like being numbers of people in detention settings since they started exceeding them? Has anything been released, or is it just kind of reports that there's?
Yeah, it's just reports because, so what happened originally was, it was going to be shock and awe. But the way the government usually identifies people to deport is that they hear from a state that a person is finishing a prison term. They're notified when that person's being released, and then ICE comes by and picks them up and deports them. And so that list of maybe, I don't know if it was 10 or 15,000 people, they went through it in like 2 weeks in the beginning. And then since they targeted Chicago and a lot of people knew you don't have to open your door, they said, put the warrant under the door. Oh, this isn't a warrant from a judge. Here, take it back. There was a lot of know your rights stuff that had happened there, or at least that's part of the theory. And so the numbers have been low. It got the head of ICE fired or moved to another position because the president was so displeased. But that's why all those other actions, right? Like they said they were going to go out really, really hard. They didn't have any of the addresses that they needed. And it's not like there were big enough workforce raids that they could do that would get them the numbers they wanted. So that's why they want those databases of ITIN numbers. That's why they want to go after all the people who came in under the CHNB parole program. There's addresses for all of them. So that's when you'll see things rev up and the detention space start to be used. Even if it's required, I don't think it matters. So.
I did put up links to organization service.
Yeah. They knew, okay, yeah, back and then up here.
Just thinking about the progress awareness, essentially, coming to class and maybe more virtual class options. Do we have a national organization looking at attendance, looking at those numbers so we can really be able to say, like, this many people were attending the classes in person before January? Cool. You know, do we have or do we need to have garden solutions that can play the law?
So I would say these questions about what data are available are really in flux because, you know, you've lost a lot of the staff at Octave and then, but I know Venu, maybe you can answer that. There's someone here who runs the New York, all the data for I don't know if it's New York State or just New York City. So I think it's gettable if you have something like that. I think you'd have to have you do it at your state level based on what people are reporting to the state. And we should also all mention that to COABE and to TESOL and National Coalition for Literacy, because I think AIR has like saved all of the databases that existed prior. So you could also do like a, hey, we're back to COVID numbers, you know, or something like that. But all of the data contracts were, you know, snipped, you know, or like they were among all the things that were cut. So I think you'd need to go state by state. 1, 2, he's come. Yes. Oh, this is Jake. This is one of those related.
Because people are hiding, therefore our skill gains and then they're going to be going down just to reflect on what our funding is supposed to be coming from. So we're trying to show the government and all the people that, you know, the new program is viable and necessary. You know, how are we supposed to show those numbers and prove to an administration that doesn't want to fund you that you're necessary when you're the reason we're in high
Absolutely.
numbers for so many.
Absolutely. So we're school district superintendents, you know, are all having that conversation. Like in a state like some states adopted an attendance indicator as their additional indicator in K-12. And so if you're in a school where there was a, you know, a workforce raid or where, you know, ICE was seen at a local school or something, you might not have kids return for 3 weeks. And so you'll just completely be failing on that indicator. So it's, you know, I think we're just going to see that in a lot of circumstances. My first thought on that is that that people really need to be on the Hill talking about that to folks from their state delegation, and then also talking. I thought it was a positive sign that Senator Patty Murray and Senator Susan from Maine. Yes. They sent a letter to the president saying, you know, we're appropriations committee people and we need for these programs to be implemented. But so I think people need to get to them and say, all right, well, don't leave all the accountability and not take any account of what is happening, you know, to our programs and being able to meet those accountability requirements. And I think they're smart. Like I think Rosa DeLauro, who's from Connecticut, and she's on I think she's the senior person on the House Budget Committee. I think when you're talking about about the budget, which is, I think, the really big thing that's happening this year that needs so much attention. I think playing out those kinds of issues related to accountability that programs are stressed with is really critical, because otherwise, you know, you're going to be backed into a corner, you know, when you're on these appropriations committees saying, oh, all right, yes, all right, we'll go along with increased accountability. These are really important. You know, like they just, I think legislators are so upside down with everything that's going on that they're probably not thinking through to those kinds of issues that'll totally undercut programs. Stories matter, you know.
My concern is this side, because here is, and there seems to have come up, and see people that it's come out, asking for get access to administrative databases that are maintained by the states, with, on, so that includes data that I might in the state. So when we don't keep track of the immigration status system, but I'm wondering whether, you know, there's some concern about taking that data, matching it with the other databases to come up with, you know, using our databases to use it against our students.
Sorry, and that's somebody from New York saying that. So what, you don't think you can get the governor to?
Depends on our concern is that, you know, there are but I'm concerned about is going directly to a program and putting
Yeah.
it away. Give us the data, your department, give us the data.
Yeah.
They may not give the results that.
So Jake, I don't mean to volunteer you or us for this, but Jake and I were talking before the session that that maybe we really should write something about what a like a safe zone or safe location policy would look like for adult ed programs, because you know, everybody does it in comparison to K-12, where you don't have the same. You have some family protections, data privacy protections, but not the same, you know, as what's there. But it is the same in terms of you having rules, you establishing what's a private space, what's a public space within your program, who is your go-to person, where you say, you know, no, our receptionist is not allowed to answer your questions. Show it, you know, we'll take a picture of who you say you are, and we're sending it to this attorney at this agency, and it will take a picture of the warrant or whatever, and we'll determine if it's legal and if we need to let you in. So I think having a whole section, speaking to data in that, and maybe we should just like put a note out to everybody who was part of this session. I think we have access to folks, and just asking any of you if there are things that you want us to try and answer, you know, in that we could do that. Because I hadn't thought about that at all, that like you might go into a program looking for their data and it's not the same as K-12. But maybe some states could expand their laws. You know, California has a law that says, you know, this is lockdown, that's lockdown. You know, maybe some of those, maybe some of the attorneys general would like also comment on that and try and do something coordinated on it. So yeah, please think about other things that you're worried about from a privacy and enforcement perspective.
So we have a lot of invitations that have come in. They're on the PhD program. I don't know if our invitations understand that, right? Like they're English very low, and like we're and like nobody's explaining anything to them. And like I said, I come off of the room and I don't care if you're immigrant, if you're not, because we don't care, right? You come in and you learn English for your grade. Like, should we be, I mean, we don't want to scare people, right? Like, should we be asking them, like, hey, do you have a plan? Maybe do you understand what's going on? Or do we just kind of, because I don't want to still hear it. Because I want to.
If some of you want to use your teacher voices without the mic, go ahead.
Hey, Margie, if you do that though, you're gonna need to.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
For
Yes,
those,
yes,
for folks
sorry.
online, if you
Sorry,
could just
sorry.
repeat the question.
So I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, and we have started know your rights sessions with our students and have them printed out, print the sheets out, we print them out in different languages. and we've broken them up into their language groups and called the translation line. So we've also been able to do trainings for our team because we also want to be cautious in terms of what we say to do or not do. And so that's why we're focusing on this teaching about the Know Your Rights tool and having those printed out and realizing that one session is not enough. We need to keep doing that over and over again, and then that other piece is doing it in everyone's so that they know that. Well,
And I'll just add that Immigrant Legal Resource Center, the, you know, if you look in that bullet that has all of the links, Immigrant Legal Resource Center has a lot of videos in multiple languages up on their website that, that are Know Your Rights. And so I think that might be another, you know, another resource that might be relevant there.
Does the resource guide provide address those undocumented folks in our country that are in various states or maybe the U.S. is engaged to U.S. hours of protections that change?
Laura, do you want to address that in terms of the resource guide you have?
Online, we can only hear like snippets of the question.
Ah.
So I heard that there was a question about the resource guide and does it address, but I couldn't hear. Can you repeat it, Margie?
Issues related to more particular circumstances like undocumented individuals who married a U.S. citizen.
No, I would say the resource guide isn't intended to give any legal advice. But probably the best thing to do is use the resource guide to be able to connect individuals to local community-based legal service providers. One of the things that we're seeing because of all the changes that are happening is that, you know, people need to know, like the Jakes of the world who are telling you, you know, this part is just noise, this is what's real, and then locally can connect you with folks who can help give local advice. So there are a few things that may matter based on what city you live in, or and so in that case, I think one of the things that we're seeing is, and one of the recommendations we would give is use the directory to find out who are the local community-based immigration legal service providers so that you have those referrals available. And then also, there's a lot of stuff happening locally to prepare for rapid response and immigration enforcement actions and to be able to support families that's being done through things like mutual aid groups, faith congregations. There's, you know, just a lot of things happening at a very local level that people may not be aware of, but it's worth spending the time to work those community connections to identify where those hubs of information are, so that when a student or a program participant comes to you, you can direct them to the right resource.
So we're at time. I think maybe maybe if folks have additional questions, we'll stick around here, and folks online, if you write in questions, we'll get back to you with answers to them. But otherwise, thanks everyone for being here, for everything you're doing day to day. And on your question too, just about that, there's practice advisories up on the Immigrant Legal Resource Center website that if you're really motivated to help someone, you might find a lot of good legal information there. So, all right, best of luck, everyone. Thanks, Laura.